Hello everybody, this is Barry Johns and welcome back to another episode of Studio Talk. As the title suggests, has Avid finally gotten it? But if so, is it too late? That is the question. Before we get this video started, I'd kind of like to ask those of you watching just one request, please. Look, I know there's a lot of Pro Tools haters out there. Therefore, probably Avid haters, okay? And trust me, I can understand why some of you feel the way you feel, okay? But I'm going to ask you, please, for the sake of this video, set those biases aside, either justified or not justified. Just set them aside and just hear me out. This is going to be a video that is critical of Avid, and this is going to be a video that has hope for Avid. There's going to be two things in this video, so I'll kind of get that out of the way right from the get-go. So can you do that for me? I hope so. All right, so for me, my relationship with Avid has been like a marriage, okay? There has been times where it's absolute bliss and amazing, and there's been other times, and many of those times, quite frankly, over the decades, that it's been so close to divorce, on the brink of it, that it took marriage counseling each time, aka other users on Avid's DUC forum, to kind of coax me off the ledge and bring a sense of reality back to me, or at least perceived reality. So I've had a love-hate, that's not like a marriage, but I've had a love-hate relationship with Avid for a long time. And I've had many, many, many issues, as you can imagine, over several decades of being a Pro Tools user. Okay, so I actually enjoy Pro Tools. I enjoy it. I've used it for a long time. I've dabbled in all the other DAWs out there, whether it be Cubase or Digital Performer. Those are the ones. There's some newer ones like, of course, Reaper is a great bang for the buck for the cost. Studio One, I've heard nothing but great things about that. And there's others out there that I'm probably forgetting, but please don't take that personally. But for me, and I also use Logic, by the way. I do quite a bit of stuff in Logic today, mainly stuff with their VIs, because I don't do that much stuff. I don't do that much work in virtual instruments, but the stock ones that come with Logic, in my opinion, are really great for the price. But the majority of my work is done in Pro Tools. You know, I've gone from, I've been with Pro Tools since the 90s. Okay, I was an early adopter. You know, I owned a TDN system, an HD3 for a very long time. Currently on Pro Tools Ultimate with HD Native, and I've got a 24-channel D command back there as my control surface. If you're interested about control surfaces, I recently put out a video on that. You should probably watch it. They're not for everybody, and so watch that and see what you think. Hopefully it can give you some perspective, which is kind of what I always try to do on this channel. I'm not the person who's going to try to sell you on something or get you to buy something. I pray I never, ever do something like that. So my advice is to help. My desire is to do nothing but help people, okay? And if you haven't figured out now, I just roll with this. Everything I say just comes off the top of my head. Been doing this for so long, you know, I don't need to refer back to some teleprompter or something. So, which is why I leave my mistakes in and all that stuff in there. So anyway, let's get back on subject, because I do have a tendency to go off on tangents, and I apologize for that. So anyway, there's been a lot of ups and downs. I would say my first period of time where I got really frustrated with Avid is when they started what I'll call subscription-based. And it didn't start out with the monthly stuff. That evolved a little bit later. But having to pay this annual renewal to be able to keep using it, I became incredibly frustrated, to the point of seriously just about leaving during that point, because you know, and I've done it over and over and over. You know, as an Ultimate user, my cost is higher. You know, as an HD/Ultimate user, my cost is higher than the native user. I pay $400 every year for the right to continue using it. And in every single year I've done it, including the most recent year, I agonized and agonized and agonized over, I'm not getting anything for my money. Nothing, certainly nothing to justify the cost that I'm spending. And, you know, it's a little easier bite to undertake if you're a native user. I think it's only $100 a year. But if, you know, that's a lot of money to a lot of people. And that's money that could go towards something else you can actually get some benefit from. Because historically, since they started that thing, you're paying for bug fixes. That's all you're paying for. And we should never have to pay for bug fixes in this stuff. I'm sorry that we just should not have to do that. And so there have been some new features, some of them good new features, and some of them I like, but nothing that warrants the cost, especially if you're an ultimate user, in my opinion, okay, as far as the cost is concerned. But lately, Avid seems to be on a roll coming from a Pro Tools user perspective. I think for the longest time, there was a time, and I know non-Pro Tools users hate hearing this. I know you hate hearing it, and I understand why. But there was a legitimate time Pro Tools was the quote-unquote industry standard, okay? And I'm talking about it in a professional sense, not for the user like you and me. It's never, ever been that case for people like you and I. But it was the case for that. And so, but that's been a long time ago. That hasn't been the case for a very long time. Computers have gotten so powerful, obviously enough for me to drop my TDM architecture, which is DSP based, and go with Pro Tools HD Native. I've got a 12-core Mac Pro back there that I actually upgraded the processors in myself. So I don't have a ton of money invested in that computer, but it historically has been a powerhouse of a computer. And so I get great results with it. So you've got that has improved and so many other things. And today, there is no one DAW is better than the other. You probably call it DAW, I call it DAW. There's not one that's better than the other. It's the one that you feel works for you and makes you the most productive and creative as you can be. But today's subject is not about those other experiences. It's directly tied to Avid and where I hope they're truly going. It seems to me that since the decline of the studio market has declined so rapidly over the last 10 to 15 years to the point to where it's almost non-existent from a local standpoint of a studio that you can actually run and make money, support a family on. And you can't do that charging $40 an hour recording somebody because your overhead, your expenses, everything else is just going to eat that away and you're barely working for minimum wage at that point. I'm not saying you don't do it, but that's just a reality that we're all faced with because we can all get the same results you're going to get in the best of studios in our home with the exception of drums, okay? And so, for the longest time, Avid, when you look at a pie chart, right, and you think about the slice of the pie that Avid dominated that in the professional market forever. And that means, and I'm going to call the professional market, obviously the high-end stuff being studios, major recording studios like Capitol Records and all of those things, and Blackbird and all that stuff in Nashville. But then you get in even the local, the medium-sized markets. HDX still dominated all of that, or DSP-based systems dominated those studios for a very, very long time. But because all of that has gone away, they don't have that anymore. And anybody who knows anything about Avid's history and their DSP-based systems is that the folks in the areas where the high-end stuff that I'm talking about, they're almost always 2-3 versions behind the rest of us. They're not willing to go out there and expand. When you look at film work as an example where Pro Tools and Media Composer dominates and still will for the foreseeable future, same thing in network broadcasting and all of that stuff. All of those components dominate. For the simple fact is you can go from one location to the next, from one company to the next, because most of that stuff is a lot of it is freelanced. And so they need everybody in the same ecosystem. It just happens to be that DigiDesign/Avid was the first to the table with that to be able to do it effectively. There were other competitors back in the day, but they just couldn't do it at the level that DigiDesign/Avid has done. So that's just a reality, whether you agree with that or not. That's kind of factual based, okay? But because of all of those diminished businesses have now gone, Avid, when you go back to that same pie chart today, I have to imagine they're finally, albeit way, way, way too late, to be honest with you. And that is the second part of my point in this, is that they finally recognize that their future is us, you and me. That's their future. That's where they're going to continue to create a consistent revenue stream, which is important to any business. Anybody who's ever run a business or been a leader in a business, you already know these things, right? And so ultimately, it seems like they're now finally starting to appeal, but it makes you wonder. So let's talk about some of the recent things that have come out over the last 6 months or so. And some of them even recent just in the last few weeks, which is really what inspired me to make this particular video today. Let's talk about Pro Tools Carbon. Pro Tools Carbon gives you that DSP-based performance for native users. And on the surface, for Pro Tools users, it's something to get exciting about. For those of you, I know a lot of people love to trash DSP-based systems. Remember, when you're trashing Pro Tools DSP, HDX, you're also trashing UAD's platform as well. People tend to forget that when they look at that with their, I'm talking about their converters, their interfaces that have their DSP-based cards built into them. People want to focus on just the plugins and plugins and plugins, but at the end of the day, that's a DSP-based thing, no matter how you look at it. And there's a lot of fans of that platform. So be careful when you're bashing, be reasonable when you're bashing Pro Tools and DSP is not needed, but yet people are fans of UAD. That brings some perspective to the discussion. So, if you've never worked in a DSP-based system and understand what truly the equivalent of no latency means, you're never really going to get it. I'll be honest with you, you're not likely to get it. As good as computers have gotten, as good as all of these things to improve, even still today, I can notice a difference when I'm in a DSP system versus a native system. And so, is it substantial? No, but it's when you start compelling things over and over, and the more you incorporate hardware I/O, to be able to use as inserts going out of your DAW, headphone mixes, complex headphone mixes. A lot of you guys out there aren't needing to do that stuff because you're basically recording yourself in your room, and a lot of this stuff's not relevant. But if you're actually recording a band or something, these things as they accumulate, make a difference. And so there is a compelling reason to where you don't have to worry about buffer size. You don't have to worry about the power of your computer. You can hold off upgrading your computer for a much longer time period based upon DSP-based stuff, where the only thing that makes you really force you to have to upgrade your computer is maybe the operating system doesn't support it anymore. So I don't want to get too sidetracked with that, but that's important in this discussion. So now you've got Pro Tools Carbon or Avid Carbon coming out that gives you all of that. So that some of you may not know this, whether it was TDM or HDX, everything of that session runs on DSP. Your mixer runs on DSP, your buses run off DSP, your hardware inserts run off DSP, obviously your plugins run off DSP. All of that, so that's everything that runs off DSP. I'll talk a little bit more about that in HDX in a second. So when you get the benefit of Carbon, that you can not worry about any of those things, and these are things that you just never have to think about. You never have to worry about, is your computer powerful enough? If you drop the buffer, are you going to get conflicts? Are you going to get errors? All these kinds of things. That just becomes by the wayside when you've got that, because the majority, I'm guessing, because I know I've started doing this for a very long time, I kind of mix as I go. I like to kind of mix as I go, and when I want to go back in and add something else, I'm lucky enough to have a very, very, very powerful computer where I can still keep a reasonably low buffer and really not have to worry about that. But when I get into large session, especially if I'm working on for somebody else and they want to come in and do an overdub, it gets somewhat questionable to some degree without having to make the sacrifice of low latency mode, which means I'd have to incorporate a hardware reverb or something else like that to really set the mood for whoever's recording, depending on what I'm doing. These things matter at the end of the day. They affect the psyche of the person that you're recording, so they matter. So I'm not trying to sell you on this stuff. I'm just trying to get you to understand, if you don't already know that, these are some compelling reasons why these type of things are still attractive today. Which is why so many interface manufacturers today have that, that mixing window that you have to use in front of your DAW, and they'll give you some minor plugins, compression, EQ, and reverb and things like that, so that you can experience that while you're recording without having to worry about these things. But that's just another thing that's in your way. Okay, so again, this whole thing is about, why is this DSP stuff compelling, which makes this whole discussion, it kind of brings it all together. You can't really talk about this discussion without talking about those things. So you've got Carbon that came out. Let's just call that exciting, an exciting move forward. You know, then they announced the hybrid engine for HDX. So now if you're an HDX user, you have all of the benefits that I just talked about with Carbon. So now, before, you may have had to have two HDX cards. You definitely could not get by with one HDX card and really do much, okay? It would have to be very minimal to be able to do that. Most people would require two HDX cards. And then the bigger stuff, three HDX cards. So now, all of that processing that historically has been done on HDX cards now goes back to native. Now your mixer, your buses, all that stuff. We're really the only thing at this point, if you're an HDX user and you choose to embrace the hybrid engine, which I can't imagine why you wouldn't, now you don't need anywhere near the number of HDX cards. Now the only reason to buy additional HDX cards or have additional HDX cards is for additional I/O. And most people simply do not need that much I/O. They're buying additional HDX cards to be able to handle large sessions with a lot of plugins. So most of those people are now going to start selling their additional HDX cards because they simply will not need them anymore. Okay, so that is a huge step forward. And what I have to imagine Avid's trying to do is to be able to extend the life of those HDX cards even further and further and further without having to develop new technology. And when you look at the power of Apple's new M1 processors, which is staggering to be an entry-level M1 MacBook Air, which I've got back there. I only bought that to help me out with video work, but of course I've done audio stuff on it, and it outperforms my 12-core Mac Pro that has 64 gigabyte of RAM, and that's a stock one with 8 gigabyte of RAM, okay? That's how powerful these things are. So within a couple of years, that's even going to make all of this more moot, and to the point to where we will eventually be, without a doubt, completely gone for any need for any type of DSP for anybody in any reason in a very short time period. We're finally actually really getting there after all these years. So now you've got that aspect of it. And so the thing that came out yesterday was now with their, I think they call them their S1s, that's their entry-level control surfaces. I also recently did a video on control surfaces. If you're interested in buying one, you should probably go back and watch that. I give you some reasons why you should get one, and I give you some reasons why maybe you should really think about that and maybe not get one. So only you can evaluate that, but I think it's best to have an informed kind of decision. But anyway, they gave the ability to be able to map plugin parameters to knobs on the control surface. And I'm thinking, this is just so typical Avid. They've had the ability to do this for a very long time. Ever since the S6s came out, they could have done this immediately, made this immediately on the new S1s when they came out, but they intentionally left it out. That's a feature that's been on that D command, which it came out, and that's a DigiDesign D command. It's not an Avid product, which means it's old. It's incredibly powerful and will smoke the vast majority of controllers out there, with the exception of the really high-end stuff like S6s, and I can't remember the model of the Steinberg one, but that's also a very compelling one, and I'm sure there's a few others out there, but that's really the Pro. Those are tens of thousands of dollars, and guys like you and me are not going to be buying something like that. I got an incredible deal on that, which is the only reason I have it, or the reason I'm able to own it, I should say, not the reason I have it. So think about, all of this, and so Avid, for the longest time, you were paying for bug fixes. They got you into this whole paying annually, and then they went into the monthly subscription, of which I've always had. Let's just say I don't like it, to put it lightly. I mean, it can bring up some emotions in me that I'm not going to share right now, but I've been incredibly frustrated every year when I've had to pay that $400 to maintain my Ultimate license, even though I paid a pretty penny for it to begin with. It's hard to spend that money every year because you're not getting anything but bug fixes, and we should never have to pay for that. So So there's a long history of not trusting Avid to do the right thing. I mean, a long history. As a loyal, long-time user, I said it's like a marriage. I've been on the brink of divorce numerous times with Avid, but I want the marriage to succeed. I want Avid to succeed simply because I enjoy that particular platform. It works for me, and I'm very productive in it. So I have no desire to look outside of it. You know, yes, there are other features that other DAWs have that Pro Tools doesn't, but those are not necessarily that compelling to me. Okay, now I understand why they're compelling to other people, but for me, I'm only speaking on my side. But Avid seems to be finally getting it, but it's already almost too late for them, I think. You know, if I'm right, and I feel I am right, if truly their potential, you know, revenue stream, the majority of their revenue stream going forward is going to be in the native world, or at least a much higher percentage than they ever experienced before, you know, they've already lost so many people because of poor leadership. Avid has suffered from poor leadership since day one. The most recent CEO that's been there for a few years, he's done somewhat of a better job. They've advanced in some technology thing, but Avid has never, ever, ever listened to its customers, not its native users. It has never listened to people like you and me, and I mean never. And I honestly don't necessarily see that changing right now or not either. It's been a huge mistake of theirs, which is all the other people, they listen. I mean, look at what PreSonus does. They listen. Universal Audio, they listen. SSL, they listen. These people listen, okay? Logic needs to stay up to date because for Apple, Logic sells computers. That's why it's so cheap and such an amazing bang for the buck, you know? But Avid has never. DigiDesign was a great company. I have zero criticism for DigiDesign. But Avid, I have 10-to-1 criticism versus compliment since Avid took over DigiDesign, okay? And so, again, I want them to succeed, but, you know, and they seem to be going in the right track. I just hope it's not solely motivated on selfish profit. Look, they're a business, and as somebody who's, you know, I'm in the hotel industry personally. I'm a director at that level, and I understand what it's like running a business and understanding the complexities of having to meet the demands of profit and loss statements and all of that. I get that as much as anybody. They need to make a profit, and they should make a profit, and the decisions they make should be based upon their ability to make a profit. But like anything else, to continue to make a profit, you have to have satisfied customers. No one's going to come to the hotels that I've worked in over my career unless we provide outstanding service. We have a great reputation, and I've been blessed to be able to work with some of the best hotels in the country. And I work at the flagship for the company I work at right now. It's the flagship hotel for that company. And I feel fortunate every day to work for that company. But I have as much passion as I have for my job, I have as much passion for doing what you and I do. And so it's the companies that listen and react, you know. And I hope Avid changes. I hope they start listening because I want them to be successful. But, you know, I think, I can't remember, I got sidetracked, so I can't remember if I talked about what they did with their control surface, they didn't. But the ability to map those plug-in parameters to the knobs, that they've had that there forever. So why did it take you so long? Why did you intentionally hold that back? You should be asking yourself these questions. If you're an Avid user, you should be asking yourself these questions. And so we should hold that company accountable like anything else. And so I hope they're on the right direction. I really, really, really do. I want to stay married to you, Avid. I do. But if you haven't truly changed, and that means truly change, just like sometimes a couple goes to marriage counselors and tells the counselor everything the counselor wants to do and wants to hear, and then they try for a few months in the marriage and then they resort back to their old tactics, well, the trust factor starts to get eroded over and over and over. And you've got a lot of users out there, Avid, that are hanging by a thread with you. And you better realize that. That's from me to you. And all of us out there that are avid users, we need to hold them accountable. Those of you out there that don't like the idea of Pro Tools, basically because you know the history that I've talked about before, keep an eye on it. See if they actually change. Because if they change, they actually do make really good products. They really do. At least in my opinion. I love them. Absolutely love them. You know, I've done a video on the pricing strategy of HDX, where it's another area where I think they really messed up. You can go back and watch that video. But anyway, that's the end of this discussion. Yes, they seem to be on the right path. What seems to be on the surface seems to look good. Avid, please keep it going. Keep it going. I want you to keep it going. Keep giving us something for the money we're spending. Whether it's somebody like me shelling out $400 a year, and let's face it, I truly don't need Ultimate. Okay? The two main reasons that I do Ultimate, and one of them I don't really need to do, you know, but one of them is I edit my video and my audio in Pro Tools and then take it over to Final Cut Pro. But I don't really need to do that. But the only reason I need to today is I want to be able to continue using HD Native and that D command back there. And so I can't use that with Pro Tools Native. So you could even start to lose people like me down to the native version, which is another $300 a year you're losing. So, but if you keep giving me something worth $400 a year, I'll keep spending it. I promise you I will, but give me something worth it. So you're doing a good job in the last 6 months to a year. Okay? You've done a terrible job in the last 8 to 10 years. And I mean absolutely terrible. You've actually sucked. Okay? But I'm hopeful. And I'm hopeful. Not just for me, but for all of you other users out there who enjoy Avid products. I have to imagine I'm probably capturing a combination of, if the people who are watching, if anybody does watch, they're Avid fans, okay, or they're Avid haters. And so the people in the middle is where Avid really needs, and the people that are Avid fans, they need to sustain them, okay? It's basic business, guys. This is not rocket science, all right? So I hope you've enjoyed this particular topic today. Put some comments down there. Tell me what you think. You know, tell me about your experiences. Either way, all I ask is always, please, 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 and so far it's been so overwhelmingly positive. I love that. Let's not attack each other in comments, but I really want you to leave comments. Tell us about your experience. Tell each other. Let other people read them. Tell me. I promise you, I read and respond to every single comment I get, and I really appreciate it. So far, I'm deeply humbled by the response to me doing these videos. Even I didn't think anybody would really ever watch when I put them out. It's just something I enjoy talking about, and I've learned kind of how to do this stuff. So as far as the video aspect of everything, and so so I'm going to keep doing this whether you watch or not, just because I just enjoy it and I'm deeply passionate about it. And I promise to always be honest and sincere with everything I say. I'm never going to try to peddle anything. I'm never going to try to sell you on something you don't need. There's so many people out there who do that, and I have issues with those people. Maybe I'll make a video about that at some point. But I'm going to work very hard to never become that. And so thank you for watching. I hope you realize that I truly do mean that, and I really, really do. So I got to plug it. You know I got to do it here. There's a little thing down there below, like, subscribe, notification bell. Hit it. You know, it really helps me. I want to grow this. If I can make just a little bit of money doing this to buy more gear, man, I'd be happy as all get out, because I'm not trying to be some famous YouTuber. I don't see that ever, ever happening. But at the end of the day, if I can do this and make a little bit of money to buy more gear, I know that's something every single one of you can appreciate. So thank you for watching, and you know what you should do? I do this at the end of all my videos. You have a great day. Before I get started, look, I know there's a lot of Pro Tools haters out there. And if you happen to be one of those Pro Tools I don't normally restart, but since I screwed up so early, I'm going to restart. Okay. All right, here we go.